What can you do to level up your account? Hello, everyone. Bront CatHerder here. We're having fun talking Raid Shadow Legends, and we're going into a bit of a list here on ways you can level up your account, get the most out of your account, improve your account, or however you want to look at it. We're going to talk about things that you can do to make sure that you are getting the most out of the things you do every day, as well as get the most out of ways to improve your account. Now, most of these are going to be pretty generic. Some of these might be specific for specific areas, but I just want to explore the game a little bit and just give some general tips. You may know about these things already. You may not know about them already. Hopefully, they're bringing some useful stuff to light to you. Appreciate you stopping by. So let's have some fun looking at some of the things you can do to improve your account. So our first trip here is actually going to be pretty simple, and it's simply doing your daily quests, the daily advanced quests. As you see, I've done mine already. I've got a few hours left to do them. And overall, you get some pretty good rewards for some of these things. Eventually, on a weekly level, you get an extra Ancient Shard. On a monthly level, you eventually get a Void Shard and a Sacred Shard. And on the advanced quest, you eventually get Legendary Books and Epic Books and 4 and 5-star chickens. Very, very helpful. Even the XP 3 days can be helpful if you time it right, if you're not overloaded with XP days. These are just generally good, easy to do things. Most of the quests are aimed at forcing you to progress your account anyway. So Polarium actually does know what they're doing with these accounts. Now there's some of them that are annoying, like the Hydra key can be sometimes very annoying if you didn't want to run a Hydra key that day. Overall, running Demon Lord, running Clan Boss, farming dungeons, fighting in Tag Team Arena, fighting in Doom Tower, more Demon Lord stuff, use some glyphs. A lot of this stuff is stuff that's useful for you to do to progress your account. And then the daily stuff is pretty simple. A little bit of Classic Arena, summon 3 champions. You can use Mystery Shards for that. Use 50 energy. You're going to be using energy anyway. Champions level in the tavern. There's some pretty easy things you can do for that. Throwing a brew or 2 in a champion does this most of the time, especially if you're talking about you're taking your 1 stars to 2 stars. I'll just take a 1 star, throw 3 1 stars and a brew into them, and they're a level 10 1 star ready to go to 2 stars. Make accessory artifact attempts. I usually almost always do accessory attempts because there's an advanced quest that occasionally does accessory attempts. Purchase it in the market. Just mystery shards are fine. Occasionally, if you need to buy a 1-star champion, they're not too expensive either. And then finally, win campaign battles. It's either going to be 7 regular campaign battles or 3 against a boss. Regardless, it's a little bit of campaign farming. It's a little bit of account training. It's fairly easy to do, and there's a monthly quest that you actually need to do to build up a bunch of these anyway. So overall, you're not going to spend more energy than you get out of this, and you get a ton of energy. You get 3.5 refills for doing your dailies as well as the time log and rewards. 3.5 refills is pretty big. Plus, you get 4 refills throughout the day anyway of energy because that's how the timer works. You're talking about almost doubling your daily energy when you do the daily quests. Now, that doesn't mean you can't occasionally miss a day here or there. There's a lot of FOMO with this game. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Don't ruin your life for this game. It's a game. But if you can make time to do your dailies or even some of your dailies, it's better than not doing any of them at all. Particularly things like Clan Boss, where you can run a Clan Boss key, especially now that it's pretty automated. You can do a Clan Boss key or 2 in a matter of minutes, and that's worth extra shards, and that's one of the best things you can do for your account. So make sure you do your daily quests, and that will help you progress because there is a reason and a methodology to what these daily quests are. So one of the best things that you can do for your account is put masteries on your champions. And to do that, you either can run Minotaur or you can spend 800 gems to just buy your masteries and go from there. While for your first champion or 2, it makes sense to buy the masteries with gems, beyond that, it is well worth running Minotaur Stage 15 to get all of your masteries. The difference is it takes about 480 to 560 gems. It can vary a little bit more than that. Expect around 520 gems to run one champion from no masteries all the way up to the full masteries. So you're saving 300-ish gems, maybe 280 or maybe even as low as 240. Still, that's a decent savings in gems. You also get bonus XP, so you can level the champion up in Minotaur as well, and you get bonus silver that you don't get otherwise, making your silver management significantly easier. Why are masteries important? Well, I actually have a video on masteries and which masteries are good, but overall, masteries can improve the damage of your champions by 20 to 40%. They can improve your accuracy significantly. They can give you additional things like extended duration on debuffs, extra turn meter, ways to counterattack. Masteries are very powerful. Masteries power up champions. Now, I'm not saying every champion needs masteries. Every champion does not need masteries. But for the champions you are going to be using regularly, particularly your arena champions, particularly some of your high-end dungeon champions, particularly for your clan boss champions, Minotaur is a great thing to run to make sure that you have your masteries. Now, some of the best ways to run Minotaur is to run with, say, I've got Ethos built as a solo farmer for this. Now, that takes some pretty high-end gear, so maybe you may not be able to have Ethos solo. You might have 2 or 3 champions instead with a damage dealer, a debuffer, and maybe even a healer to carry along 2 ungeared champions to be able to run this. And then what happens is those 3 champions basically sit in Minotaur, and that's where they're at. They can even be rebuilt for other content as well. They don't have to be exclusively for Minotaur. And then meanwhile, they will take 1 or 2 champions that are ungeared up, and you can make the runs 30 seconds or less pretty easily. Minotaur is not a very hard dungeon eventually for mid to end game. Spend some time running it. There's some tools like RSL Helper that can help you run the exact number, but otherwise you run an approximate number of Minotaur dungeons, see where you're at with it, and you may have to run a few manually and you're good to go. You can spend gems on it if you want to. If you're not doing anything else super exciting, you can always just spend your daily energy on it. So it might take you 2 or 3 days to get a champion all the way up from no masteries to full masteries. And if you're farming multiple champions at the same time, it definitely will take a bit longer. But overall, more champions that you can stick in here gives you more XP on all of those champions and makes it much more efficient. So definitely farm Minotaur. It is a great way to make the best use of your gems, as well as get additional silver, as well as get additional XP. That's why I recommend running Minotaur, and masteries are super important as well. Speaking of ways to power up your champions, souls are super important in this game now. It's been a new addition, as in been going on for the past year or so. Blessings add a lot of stats. They've been buffed recently to add stats of all kinds. Having souls and having blessings for your champions is a huge, huge power up. So Iron Twins is one of the dungeons that not everyone really likes to farm. It can be difficult, especially in the higher ends. There's a couple of teams that make it pretty easy. Lower levels are actually not too bad. In fact, I think getting to level 9 is about the equivalent to getting to level 20 in most normal dungeons. Level 12 is around level 25. It is getting from level 12 to level 15 that's really, really the tough one. You should try to use your 6 keys every day to farm for the soul coins, to be able to buy soul gems, to be able to get better souls for your champions. You want to make use of the wish list as well. So the wish list is good. You can certainly throw rares in there that are rares that you're going to be using. You can throw epics that are going to be using, and your legendaries are going to be using as well. Generally, I like to prioritize either legendaries that I either have a very low soul on. So if I've only got a 0, 1, or 2 level soul, I'll probably put a legendary in there for that, or for some of the ones that are just super important on my account. It also helps if I need duplicates, because you cannot buy duplicates very easy from the soul merchant until you finish one champion's souls. So I have multiple Shamails, so I wanted to get a better Shamail soul. I don't have an Aboro soul at the moment. I'm actually building a Boro for some other content, so I need an Aboro soul, so I've got her here in my epic pulls. I have 2 newts, so I wanted to pull a newt, a second newt soul, so I put newt in here. I have multiple Soulbond Boyers. I have multiple Cold Hearts. I have multiple Pain Keepers. That's pretty much the rares I use pretty regularly. Make use of your wish list. Make use of pulling the souls. And you can save pulling the souls for things like events where you're going to get extra points in them. So you get soul rushes or soul chases. Those are not too bad. You get additional rewards for pulling during those. There's occasionally 2x of 5 or 6 star souls sometimes. Save them for that. Clan versus clan, they're good source of points for clan versus clan, so you can certainly save them there. You can use them wisely, and you don't need to be spending them constantly, but you should not be saving onto them to the point where you have hundreds of souls that you've never pulled anywhere. If they're not pulling them occasionally, they're not helping you, and you might as well not be running the dungeon. Running the dungeon gives you better chance to get souls. Better chances means you're more likely to get the souls you want. And if you don't get the souls you want, that lets you buy them in the shop. Souls are super important and a super good way to improve your account. Gear is generally the lifeblood of your account, but there are all kinds of fun places you can get gear outside of dungeons now. Dungeons are great, especially for early game, because they're a good way to just put energy and get gear for farming. Later game, there's all kinds of sets that you can use to improve your account that are much better than some of the stuff you can farm in the dungeons. So you want to be paying attention to that. Run Hydra, because even the worst chest in Hydra is progress towards Mithrala if you don't already have her, and gives you Stone Skin and Protection, both of which are very good sets. Even if you're getting 5-star gear, if you're progressing and only running the normal low chest of Hydra, a 5-star Stone Skin or 5-star Protection set can help you a ton. Farm Cursed City. Cursed City gives you the wonderful sets of Merciless and Supersonic. Those are very good sets, and you're going to be keeping those and using those. And even doing the normal Cursed City stuff is amazing. There's 6-star gear you can get from normal levels. So farm normal, keep your Merciless, keep your Supersonic, trim it down if you need to. Great set. Live Arena has Impulse and Zeal. Both of those are decent sets, although Impulse is a much better set. It's basically an improved Reflex set. Very good. Well worth farming for that. I realize Live Arena is a bit of a chore for some folks, but there's a reason to run it. That set's actually pretty good, so it's something that's worth thinking about. The Forge Passes, even if you don't spend on the Forge Pass, the Forge Passes give you a good value as well. So making sure you try to get your Forge Pass up to 50 gives you a chance to forge some Bolster or some Instinct or some Defiant or some Righteous or even some Slayer. And those are really, really powerful sets as well that can be helpful for improving your account. Not only that, but forging accounts in general is very helpful. Faction Wars gives you the lifeblood of your account in Perception gear. And Resilience gear is not bad either, particularly because you can forge it and you can be very picky on it, and it's still very useful to have additional HP and defense on some champions, so it's not a useless set. And then finally, the Doom Tower stuff. Farm your Doom Tower champions. Untouchable, not the greatest set, but still useful. Fatal can be useful. Frostbite has its place. Guardian is a very powerful set. Fortitude can help you with some resistance. Lethal is one of the better sets in the game. All those Doom Tower sets are very helpful for progressing your account because forging gear is ultra powerful. I do have a video on forging gear. I'll link that down below as well. Go check that out. Finding ways to get gear beyond just the normal dungeons is very important to progressing your account. Now, this one's going to vary a little bit depending on where you are in the game, but revisiting your builds can be huge, especially for early game where you build a champion and you farm some gear. There's actually a good chance that in that run you just farmed, you might have a single piece of gear that might be a huge improvement for a champion you're running on. Later on, it's going to take a little bit longer. But if you're farming for 2 months worth of gear and you're not gearing a bunch of new champions, then that new gear that you have is hopefully better than some of the stuff that's on your current champions. So it is worth going through your champions, taking a look at what the champions you use, where you're using them, and if you can gear them to be better than they currently were without breaking the team. There's some things that don't always need to be revisited. Like if you have a 100% one key Ultra Nightmare Clan Boss team, you never need to visit it again. It's done. It's good. Unless you're using some of those champions in other places, then maybe you might want to improve them. Campaign farmers are another option as well. Campaign farmers are ones, once they're built, they don't really need to be rebuilt most of the time. But your arena champions definitely could use rebuilding. Your champions you're using in Fire Knight could definitely be used for some rebuilding. Your Hydra team could definitely use some rebuilding. There's all kinds of teams where getting more damage, making the champions go faster, making the run go faster, making the builds better can improve your account. It can also help improve your account for things like Centranos, Cursed City. You can also help improve your account for some of the secret rooms because oftentimes the champions you're using in daily activities also appear in those secret rooms. One of the best ways to do this is to do this during the free regear days. So if you're doing a free regear, you want to start taking a look at some of your champions. So maybe you took a look at your top 2 or 3 arena nukers and say, hey, how are these guys built? Is there a chance I can get a little more speed or a little more accuracy if I needed to, or a little more crit damage or a little more attack or defense or HP, depending on what type of champion it is. Sometimes it's something as simple as using your ascension stuff. So using the oils and the dust can sometimes help as well. So maybe you're haven't ascended some of this stuff and you can just spend some time ascending it. There are ways to improve your champions that happen from farming, both for regular gear as well as other non-gear pieces that you can sometimes use, and oftentimes it's pretty easy to forget that they even exist. So revisit your champions. It's well worth doing, and it can make a huge difference in progressing your account when one of the champions you already rely on suddenly gets significantly better. So this tip was going to be part of another tip, but I felt it was important enough that I wanted to break it off and leave it as own, and that is managing your gear. So there's a couple different things that go into managing your gear better. First of all, when you get gear that you want to keep in the first place, you want to try to roll it up to +8 or +12, and that depends on where you are. Earlier accounts are going to want to roll them up to +8 because it does take a significant amount of silver to roll to +12. +8 is very good, especially for things like rare gear. It gives you a general idea of what stats you're going to hit on the substats, and that's very important because just because a piece of gear has 2 out of 3 substats that are good, once you roll it to +8, if it hits the one substat you did not want, that's still not a particularly good piece of gear. So it allows you to throw it away and recover some silver. Rolling to +8 generally is a zero-sum game as well. If you roll an item to +8 and then sell it, it tends to break even. Not 100% of the time, but it tends to break even. So +8's a good early game place to roll up some of your gear. +12 becomes more useful later on when you are getting pickier with gear, and sometimes even a single bad roll on 3 rolls is enough to tell you that that piece of gear isn't worth keeping on your account. So +12 is where my account's at. My account is very late. As you'll see here, I've got a bunch of +12 and even +16 gear laying around ready to get thrown on champions. It also means that if I need to start cleansing some of my gear, it's already rolled up, and now I can take a look and see, hey, this piece of gear may be good, but it's not as good as these other 3 shields that I haven't used yet. So why keep the 4th best shield on my account for the same purpose when I'm probably not going to build enough champions to get to that 4th piece? So one of the things that you can do while building your account up is to roll these pieces of gear and then start comparing them a little bit to see which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't. You want to make sure you keep some level of gear on your account. Some people like to run lean. Some people run as low as 500 pieces of gear on their account. I think that is way too low. I generally aim for around 1,000, maybe 1,200 is a good lowish number for how many pieces of gear I want on my account, because there's so many variety of different ways you can gear your champions, different gear sets to use. It gives you a lot of flexibility to have a lot of that gear at your disposal. That said, you also don't want to be where I'm at right now. I'm at almost full, and I need to start clearing gear out pretty regularly if I start farming. When you're getting close to this, you should go through and double check things. Check duplicate items of the same type, they're the same roll up, and see which ones rolled better, and maybe you start trimming and you find uses for those pieces and you get rid of the pieces you don't need. There's a lot of silver you can unlock in your gear when you sell some of it, so that's great, but it's hard to know what your gear even does if you don't have it rolled up to a +8 or a +12 ahead of time. As I can tell you, as somebody who does a lot of takeovers, it is more frustrating to find an account that has none of this stuff rolled up, because it becomes a much bigger silver sink and time sink for me to roll up gear to find gear that's actually appropriate to put on champions. Whereas if everything is already +8, I can already eliminate half of the gear that he's looking at as gear that's not going to fit for this build, or better yet, I at least know that this gear is generally fairly good for this build, and it's much easier to hit specific stats if most of the RNG has been taken out of it, knowing what you actually have. Manage your gear well, trim it down a little bit when it gets too heavy, make sure you keep a little bit of it, because if you don't have enough gear, you suddenly can't gear your champions well. And overall, start rolling it up, keep it at +8 if you're early on in the game. Once you get to a point where you got enough silver, get it to +12. Good times to roll those things up, or CVC is a great time to roll it up, as well as the artifact enhancement events. So generally, if there's an artifact enhancement event, I will go through my account and find any unrolled gear at least in the regular artifacts, and roll them up. For accessories, it's not as big of a deal to roll things up because accessories have much more limited stat selection, and you can be a little pickier with what you need in those as well. So quite often I will only roll those up either as part of my daily quests. I'll roll some of the special ones up, or I will roll up general stuff when I'm looking for a specific type of ring, for example. If I need an attack ring, I'll start rolling up my attack rings for that particular faction because I know I need them right that moment, and that's also a good time to possibly cleanse a few of them that roll badly. You need to manage your resources, and this is probably the toughest one because managing resources can mean different things for different people. For example, I'm here looking at my shards, and as you'll see, I've got a decent amount of shards. I've got a good amount of ancient shards. I've got a few sacred shards. I've got some primals. I've got some voids. I save my shards for 2x events, particularly for voids and ancients, and primals, in fact, too. I definitely will not pull primals if it is not a 2x mythical. And then sacreds I tend to save for fusions because the summon rushes need sacred shards. The sacred shards make it easy. I also will save my shards when I can for guaranteed events. 2x events, guaranteed events, and summon rushes for fusions are great times to pull shards. Otherwise, be careful. There is nothing wrong with skipping a shard pull event if it either isn't going to give you anything that you need or want specifically, or you're trying to save up for a guaranteed, or you're trying to just save up for a fusion. Overall, managing your shards, very, very helpful. But it's not just your shards. Manage your energy very well. If your energy is full, you stop regenerating energy. So you want to try to sit under 130 energy when possible. Now, sometimes that's not, particularly if you spend and happen to have gotten a bunch of energy dumped into your account from spending, or it's CVC and you just grabbed a bunch of energy from CVC, or you've just finished your daily quests and you got all the energy from that. But in general, you regenerate 4 refills worth of energy per day. So if you are not below the energy max, you're not regenerating energy, which means you can lose up to 4 refills of energy a day. So if you're sitting at 20,000 energy, you're actually wasting 4 refills a day. Just be careful with that. Sometimes it's hard to do, and sometimes you're saving it for something specific. You want to be careful on that. I try to keep silver around, so I try to keep at least 20 million silver around at all times when possible. Partially because you never know if you're going to have to build a champion, and as low as 20 million silver can be enough to build a champion. On my account, because most of my gear is rolled up, I actually usually need less than 20 million silver. For an account that does not have their account gear rolled up, it can take 30, 40 million silver for a single champion sometimes, because you're rolling a lot more gear if you haven't pre-rolled some of it up. That gives me a shot at doing 1 or 2 or 3 artifact enhancement events. It allows me to build for champions that I need to build in other ways. It allows me to spend in the tavern to use brews instead of running campaign to save some energy. Silver is a good resource to hold on to. Now, it's certainly hard to do, especially if you're an early game account where you're building a lot of champions. So keep in mind, you want to aim for what makes sense for your account. For me, 73 million is decent. It's actually a little low because I've been building a bunch of champions for some other stuff I'm going to be doing. But I'll build that back up at some point in time, and hopefully I'll be over 100 million again at some point. Gems is another one I suggest keeping. Even if you are not spending any money in the game, you can build up gems. My alt has 4,000 gems. I don't spend on that account. I've won a gem pack from a content creator once recently. Otherwise, it's just me building up gems and not spending them. On this account, I've got access to the gem pack, so I get more gems more often. I tend to spend them a little more freely, but I try to stay above 1,000. Because that gives me the 800 I need to buy masteries if I absolutely need to buy masteries in a rush. Again, going back to the Minotaur, I'd rather farm Minotaur, but sometimes you need to do something in a time frame. It also means that if I decide I want to go ham in a particular event, say there's a Fire Knight tournament, I want to harm that Fire Knight tournament, well, suddenly I can dump 400 gems into it and get 10 refills worth of Fire Knight gear, for example. So keeping some gems is very useful. It also means that fusions become much easier because having enough gems to buy 11 ancients could be the difference between not making a summon event and making a summon event. Having those gems can be enough to not making a training event to making a training event. They can also help with your Dungeon Diver event. Using gems to help with the Dungeon Divers event is kind of where I use a lot of my gems now in Fusions. Well worth looking into. You don't have to spend in Raid. Raid plays very well as a free-to-play, and the free-to-play experience is actually very enjoyable when you take it seriously. And even if you don't take it seriously and play casually, as long as you are having fun, there is no wrong way to play Raid. That said, if you decide to spend, be careful with how you spend, know what deals are good deals, learn what is the best for you. For example, this mini mix pack is generally a pretty good deal overall, especially when it's actual shards as opposed to these prism crystals. The Demon Lord keys, not bad. Extra energy is always useful. The arena refills can be useful if you're going for Platinum Arena. If you're not going for Platinum Arena, you may find you don't use those that often. It really depends on how heavy you're pushing Arena. The experience boost is great, but eventually you build up tons of that. Brews don't hurt. Coins don't hurt either, but there's nothing super amazing on this. But this is a $2.99 pack. It's not too bad in raid standards. And keep in mind, raid standards are probably a little higher than a lot of the games as far as a pack is concerned. Mini mix pack can be helpful, and the more you spend, this becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger pack, and sometimes that can be a lot better for you. The daily gem pack is probably the best value in the game. The daily gem pack, which you see I just recently purchased, is $10 for 2,000 gems, and you get them daily, marked for you. On top of that, you can at day 30, where you'll get 200, I think, gems. It then immediately becomes available again. So on day 30, you can then buy the day 1 gems, and that's 450 gems on that same day. That's a lot of gems. That could give you a really big swing in how many gems you have. It gives you as little as just one more refill a day, but overall, the extra gems give you a lot of flexibility on your account. Other things you can buy will really depend on what you're looking for. If you're looking for books, you want to be careful, because if you're not going to use the epic books or the rare books, buying a pack that includes epic, legendary, and rare books, you're wasting your money on 2 of the 3 things. So make sure that the legendary books you're going to buy are actually worth what you want to spend on them. If you're buying shards, make sure you're buying shards you actually want to use, or you're buying a pack that gives you shards plus other things that are useful. So shards plus gems, never a bad idea. Well, not say never a bad idea. You certainly want to look at what you're getting out of them, but the gems are always useful as well. Shards plus silver, usually not so exciting, because the silver is usually just enough to pull the shards. Buying gear can be hit or miss depending on what you're buying. I don't want to tell you that I know everything as far as what's the most valuable thing to purchase in Raid. That's why I use creators like Smiley TK and MTG Jedi, who I know regularly release content based off of, is this pack good? In fact, if you check out my Discord down below, I actually have a feed on the Raid spending packs from Smiley TK's Discord. Go check him out. He's a great content creator. I'll go link to him down below as well. He does a lot of the analysis on what the average price of things are, compares packs to the average price, gives an overall pack view, but also gives you warnings based off of whether or not everything in the pack is worthwhile for you, or whether you should ignore the price on certain things as well. There's plenty of ways to spend on Raid. There's plenty of ways to not spend on Raid as well. But if you choose to spend, because money is definitely a resource in your pocket, make sure that you know what you're getting. Don't buy things like just plain silver. Be careful about buying things like potions. You're better off buying things like gems, because gems allow you to earn silver. You can go farm for your potions. You can farm for the gear. The overall gems is a very flexible utility to buy. So buying gems tends to be valuable, but there's other things that can be okay as well. And there's always a sliding scale of what's going to be helpful for you versus what is going to really not be worthwhile. So it's worth looking at. It's worth checking out. Spending can be very rewarding in this game as well. Spending can also hurt a lot. So be careful with what you buy, and be careful with how you use your resources. And keep in mind that your own money is one of your resources, as is your own time. If you feel you're spending too much time in the game, feel free to take a break. It is really easy to get caught up in the fear of missing out, but there's more to life than Raid. At least I've been told that. I think there's more than life than Raid. I don't know. So hopefully this has been helpful. These have been 7 different tips on ways you can level up your account. Nothing major here. Hopefully, a lot of this stuff was just kind of review for you guys. And if this was not, then that's great. If you get a chance, appreciate liking, subscribing, all that fun stuff. Definitely appreciate all the support. Until the next video, I'm Bront CatHerder.